and they're really hurting. There's a lot. His experience, which would be great. All right. Yeah, Chris was like, I wonder if Lindsay knows that he's coming. It's like, oh, I'll tell her. If you want this book, it's not in our resource center. It has been at times. I'll put it back there. But if you want to read, the Covenant just did a book study on this, like the whole Covenant, and I've read it years ago. They did a rewrite to make it more current, but it really is like, as far as like a Christian response to immigration and refugees and all of that. Welcome the Stranger, it's called. I have copies if anyone wants to take one. I think it really helps you understand what's happening, understand the whole issue of immigration, and I'm going to say on Sunday, like if you have strong opinions about something, well, I mean, I really think you shouldn't have too strong opinions unless you're pretty well educated on something. You shouldn't have a huge opinion on the Vikings if you didn't watch a Viking game all year long, right? So I think we should take the time to get educated, and it can take some time. The situation is complicated. And so Sunday will be a small step to helping people, have some education. But this book, I think, is quite helpful. So feel free to grab a copy if you would like. All right. Here's before we jump into the content tonight. I'm excited about this. This is Sure. Yeah, that's right. We got a little partnership now. There you go. Perfect. There's a conference coming up in April/May that I want to make you aware of. It's called Exiles in Babylon. It happens like every year, but I know this is the second year in a row it's in Minnesota. It's a great conference. It's very much along with what we're doing here on Wednesday night. They have a lot of great speakers. They like to debate. It's not a conference that's very narrow-minded. So it's a conference where if you like questions, and even like if you like to hear two sides of an issue, they're going to have multiple times. Pastor Chris went to it last year. A lot of the speakers I follow online, and they're going to have debate where they'll present two sides, and you'll be like the jury. Well, which one makes the stronger argument? It's not going to be a very narrow-minded conference. I put on here some of the sessions. How should Christians think about artificial intelligence? Immigration, very, very, we'll see if what I say on Sunday is similar to what they say. Mental health in the gospel. Mental health is a huge issue in our culture right now, so they're going to have some mental health experts. A debate on is the Bible historically reliable? Very interesting. A debate on Christians in war. They're actually going to have Paul Copon be one part of the debaters. He's the one that wrote, Is God a Moral Monster? He's the one that's going to present more of a violent God. So I'm going to imagine Christians should be involved in war. But there'll be, I forget who the person is on the other side of the issue, and they're going to have a very civil, but they're going to go back and forth. They have breakouts that I've put on there. And so I would love. I'm hoping to attend the class. Pastor Rachel is committed to going. Part of this raises questions, and it can be maybe even disconcerting at some level. Like, whoa, I don't think I believe that, but that argument was compelling. What do I do with that? And so Pastor Rachel's going to go. My daughter Elise is getting married on May 16th, and she's getting married at Emily's farm. So we have to not only get the wedding ready, but the venue ready. And I'm going to work hard to have enough done where I can be here, but I know that I might be in full panic mode. But Pastor Rachel's going to go. Good chance Pastor Chris might go. He went last year. And so it's $269, and I want to encourage you. It's a great follow-up to this class. Any questions about this? Schedule's on the back. Just let us know. We'll talk about it on Sunday at some level. Let us know if you're going, because we'll kind of go as a group.
Yeah, just looking at it online.
Yeah.
It is Thursday.
Yeah, so it's like Thursday night, Thursday evening, and then all day Friday. So I know that can be, but you know, you can go to what you can go to as well. You don't have to go to it all. But if you can take a Friday off or can make it, yeah. And it says on there, you can do it virtually for $99, which is interesting because it's kind of encouraging people not to go in person, which is always better. But you can for $99. I know, Chris, you can access the content then, and so that's another way to take it in, but it's great. All right.
239.
Yeah, January what, Jeff?
January 10th.
January 10th. Yeah. I was hoping nobody noticed that. Like, come on, Dave, why didn't you tell us about this earlier? Thanks for calling me out, Jeff. That ship has sailed. We're paying full price. All right, just a quick review. We're going to be in Exodus 16, Exodus 16 to 24. Next week, we're finishing the book of Exodus. So if you want to read, next week there's a lot of reading if you want to read it. It's Exodus 24 to the end of Exodus, which I think is Exodus 40. Today, we're Exodus 16 to 24. Just a quick review of where we're at. There was, in Genesis 1, creation, and we found that God is a God of order. In the pinnacle of creation, were men and women made in God's image. Quickly, God gets rejected, and chaos starts to come into creation. So as you separate yourself from God, what you experience is more and more chaos. And so Genesis 6 is the flood. Chaos reigns again. We go back to Genesis 1:1. That's an undoing of creation, and then God starts making a partnership with people to bring order back to the world. And what's the biblical term for partnership with people? Covenant. Yes, the name of our church, covenant. So a very important word that we're talking about. I know we talked about it on Sunday. Sundays and Wednesdays are kind of lining up, so hopefully it's some repetition, but hopefully that helps it sink deeper into our souls. So the first covenant was with Noah, and it was this covenant that the flood is not going to happen again. Noah didn't have to do anything. It was a covenant with him, and then things really pick up in Genesis chapter 12. It's a covenant with who? Who's the next covenant with? This is annoying. Yes, Abram, who becomes Abraham. And Abraham is going to be the beginning of which nation? Father of which nation? Israel. Now this is, the Bible gets confusing. What other names does Israel go by? Jacob. They also go by the name Hebrews. There's one other name. Jews. Yep. The Jewish people. These are all synonyms. There's reasons why they're there, but it's all the same people. So he makes a covenant with the Israelite people. They're going to be a blessing to the nation. They're going to show the world that there's a God of order, because all their gods are gods of chaos, and there's a God of order. And so that's going to be it. There's a covenant symbol that's circumcision. Of course, circumcision is just for males, and Jesus is going to change. Circumcision is kind of your way into the covenant. Jesus expands this new covenant. He changes circumcision into what? What's like our entry point? It's, yes, baptism. And baptism is it's beautiful for a lot of reasons. One is it's an entry point for men and women, baptism. But circumcision becomes important as a follower of God who is called Yahweh. So Abraham slowly, painfully has one child, and the nation starts to grow until eventually the nation is in Egypt, and it becomes a slave nation. And then God sends a deliverer to bring his nation out of slavery and into freedom. And who's that deliverer? Moses, yes. And so we have this showdown of who is God, which we've been talking about here on Wednesday nights. Who is God? Is it Pharaoh? Is it Egypt? Or is it Yahweh? And so we ended last week with the people outside of Egypt. They go through the Red Sea, which should be a symbol of baptism. You go through the water to new life. It's a new birth, and they're on the other side of the Red Sea, and the most powerful army in the world is swallowed up by chaos because evil always destroys itself. Jesus would say it this way: he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Chaos ends up swallowing itself up, and so we end up with Moses on the other side of the Sea of Reeds with these people who are just saved, redeemed, born again. But what do we do? What do we do now? And so that's where we are in the story in Exodus chapter 16. We're going to touch on just a few highlights of Exodus 16. Exodus 16, one of the things that happened, I think, in Exodus 13 or so, or 14, the people start to complain. And they're very human. We can really rail on all their shortcomings, but as we do that, we know that we're all people of shortcomings. We all get crabby fast, and we especially get hangry. And so did the Jewish people. They started to really complain. They're in the desert. There's not enough food. And in Exodus 16, God starts to send them manna and quail. And it's this amazing miracle where this bread just shows up on the ground miraculously so that they can eat. But in Exodus 16, they're told each day how much bread can they get? How many days worth of bread can they gather? It's one day. So they have all this bread, but when they gather enough bread for 2 days, because that's what we do, right? I'm going to make sure I got bread for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It spoils and it goes bad. And God told them 1 day. Why would he say that? Why only 1 day? Yeah, it becomes this idea of trust. Who are you relying on? Do you trust me? Now, what should we think about when we think about manna and bread for 1 day? We should think about the Lord's Prayer, which we pray every Sunday at Linwood. And when Jesus said, this is how you should pray, give us today our daily bread, all the people he was talking about on the mountain were Jewish people. They would have thought of Exodus 16. They would have thought of this whole story because the bread for 1 day happens for 40 years or so. It's a huge part of the story. So when Jesus said, give us today our daily bread, they're like, Exodus. Oh yeah, we got to trust God. We don't need bread for a week. We just need bread for today. And tomorrow we need bread for tomorrow. It's still a lesson we all struggle with, right? We want to know that our retirement, we want to know that life is going to be good tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So when Jesus was on the mountain and he fed 5,000 people, he fed them with what? With bread, right? And fish. What did they think of? They thought of Exodus, this miraculous bread that would appear. And when Jesus did it twice, he fed 5,000 and 4,000. Jesus was showing that he's Moses. He's the next Moses. He's the next deliverer. Only he's greater and more powerful than Moses. But there's so much of what Jesus did, it's just the same story. He's like, yeah, this is who I am. I give you your daily bread. Pray for your daily bread. On the mountain, I give you the daily bread. Miraculously, just like the people got manna from Yahweh. Why? Because I am Yahweh. I am the bread of life. He who believes in me will neither hunger nor thirst. Interesting thing is introduced before the Ten Commandments in Exodus 16, and it's the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a really big deal for Jewish people. It still is. Sabbath. It's a huge deal for the slaves. Why? Because they're slaves. They were working 7 days a week. They were told when to get up, when to eat, when to go to the bathroom. They didn't get a break. And suddenly God says, well, here's the thing. Even in Exodus 16, before the Ten Commandments, on the Sabbath, don't work. It said, collect your daily bread each day. For them, the Sabbath started Friday night. It was Friday night to Saturday night. And so he said, when it's Friday morning, you're going to get enough bread for 2 days. That's the 1 day you can get enough bread for 2 days. Because on the Sabbath, I want you to laugh, I want you to take naps, and I want you to enjoy your family and your friends. What a gift to people that are used to being slaves. They were supposed to rest. And so the Sabbath is introduced, and it becomes a big deal. Jesus gets in trouble. I would argue, I'm just kind of throwing, I haven't done the math, I guess. but I'm pretty certain I would be right. That when Jesus gets in trouble with the Pharisees, the thing he gets in trouble most for is the Sabbath. We're going to talk about it a little bit today. Jesus is pro-Sabbath, but like anything that's good, it can get out of place in our life and get wonky. And Jesus gets himself in trouble a lot because of the Sabbath. Exodus 17, you see the people grumble again, and even in their grumbling, God gives them what they're grumbling about. But you see the people that have been given a great gift continue to complain. And then in Exodus 18, Moses' father-in-law comes. And Moses' father-in-law, we've talked about, his name is Jethro. He has like 3 names in the story, which is confusing, but it's just the way it is. He tells Moses that he should be governing in a different manner, and Moses listens to him, to Moses' credit. But I just want to point out before we get to Exodus 19, one verse. Look up Exodus 18, verse 11. And I want you to remember, if you remember the whole story of Exodus, is this question, right? Who is God? And there's one word we talked about that comes up a lot in the story. It's this word, no. The whole signs and wonders, it wasn't petty revenge on the Egyptians. God wanted the world to know that there's a God of order, that there's a God who is supreme, that there is a God of gods and a King of kings. He wanted the world to know. And look at what Jethro was not in Egypt. He was in Midian, but here's what he says. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the other gods, for he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly. That was the goal. The question is, how many other people in the world at that time would echo that statement? One is Rahab, right? We'll meet Rahab in the book of Joshua. Like, she had heard, she knew. There's probably way more than we might even know that met and started to follow Yahweh because of this showdown between Israel and Egypt. But that's the goal, and for Jethro, he saw it correctly. Jethro in the story is always a pretty wise man. All right, now Exodus 19. I teased online, and I preached on this the first Sunday of the year, I think. So if you saw that sermon, hopefully this is review for you. I think Exodus 19 quite possibly is the most important chapter in the Old Testament, and it's often overlooked. And so I'm not going to totally repeat my whole sermon, although I know I don't want to assume everybody was there, so we are going to repeat some of it. But at Exodus 19, it shows the people are gathered at a mountain. Now remember, there's all these themes in Scripture, like to understand the story. So what do you do on a mountain in the Bible story? The mountain is for what? Yes. The mountain is always where you meet God. So when Jesus fed the 5,000, he went up on a mountain. Well, that's all this language of the people are going to learn from God. They're going to meet God. So the mountain is where you meet God. And so they gather back at the mountain. And in verse 3, Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain. And he says, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, that you are all to tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you'll be my treasured possession." So when I preached, I want you to think about this. What's the most important word in verse 5 of Exodus 19? Give me some time. Yes, the most important word, which is a very important word, is if. If you listen to the podcast that I sent out, it's from Peter Enns, Peter's a good guy. Peter Enns is actually going to be at Exiles in Babylon. I don't always agree with Peter. Peter's going to push the envelope farther than I like sometimes, but he wrote a commentary on Exodus that I've used a lot. But he said the exact same thing, which I've first encountered in seminary, and was like, whoa, this is really true. The most important word is if. Why is that so important? Now, if it's important because God is not forcing the people to do this. God, like I preached on that Sunday, God could have easily said, I saved you, now you're my slaves. I saved you, now you have to do what I say. I saved you, now you're mine. That's how humans work. The God of the universe saved this nation and said, now if you obey me, now do you want to obey me? God never wants, Christianity is never about you have to do this, you have to obey these rules to please God. Christianity is always about a partnership. God asking, I want you to trust me. I want us to have a healthy relationship. And so if is important, and it's this reminder, we're going to see it again in Exodus 20, that grace comes first. I think this is one thing in this class I want you to really get into our minds, that grace comes first. So in Genesis 1, Adam and Eve did nothing, and this whole beautiful world was created, and they were put in this world in relationship with the God of the universe. I did nothing to be born into life. It was a gift. Your birthday, we should celebrate it. It's the gift of life. It's a grace. The Israelite people did nothing except suffer. They didn't earn it. God saved them. And then he says, if. So grace comes first, and it's a response to grace. And look at what actually happens in Exodus 19. God says, if, and then look at verse 7. So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people to set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. So he said, here's what God says. And the people all responded together, we will do everything the Lord has said. So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. So we should see this as a marriage. A covenant is like a marriage. It's a partnership. It's not forced. It's not like, I can't tell, Anita couldn't say, you have to marry me. If Anita said that, our marriage would be on a very bad foundation. It's, do you want to? Will you trust me? And so that's what happens here. And the people respond, yes, we're in. So here's the truth. Once you say yes to the covenant, what does it change? It changes, yes equals changed expectations. That's true for all of us that say yes to a covenant with God. You end up with changed expectations. Why? Because you said yes. I'm just going to highlight, I know time's going to go fast here. In Exodus 19, I'm not going to read all of this, but if the rest of Exodus 19 becomes very interesting, because you start to realize that, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, but it becomes very much a very big part of the story, that holiness doesn't become, it always has been, but holiness is very dangerous. We talked about this with Moses and the burning bush. But if you read the end of Exodus 19, God keeps telling the people, if you come too close to me, I'm going to kill you. If you come too close to me, you're going to die. And suddenly it can seem like God's a pagan God, like God is very short-tempered. If you read the story, God says it like 3 or 4 times. Actually, the end of Exodus 19, I think, is kind of comical because he's already said it, and he says to Moses, go tell him one more time. And I think there's a scripture where Moses said, I already told him. I don't know if I can find it quickly. Look at verse 23 of Exodus 19. He said, Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy. If you read Exodus 19, he said it like 2 or 3 times already. So Moses is like, you already told us. And the Lord replied, go down and bring Aaron up with you, but the people must not come up to me. And Moses, then it says in verse 25, Moses went down to the people and told them. It doesn't say again, but that's what it means. He told them again. So God isn't angry here. It can seem like God's really angry, or God isn't like wanting to kill people. God is simply holy. And if holy comes in contact with sin, this is important to understand in the Old Testament story. What happens What happens when holiness comes into contact with sin? Sin will get consumed. God is holy, and anything sinful will be consumed. So what's God represented by in the Old Testament? What element? Yeah, God's represented by fire. It's a good example of this. So like if you put a piece of wood in a fire with some nails in it, what's gonna be left when it's all done? The nails, the metal, the impure things, the things that aren't holy are going to be consumed. So actually, if you read at the end of this story is Exodus 24, it ends the same way it begins. It ends with this awesome picture of this holy God who's powerful and mighty, and it's called a consuming fire. But he wants these people to know him, and in his grace, he's rescued them. And in his grace, he's going to live with them. But it's very dangerous and tenuous because he's holy and they're sinful. If you read Exodus 24 to 40 for next week, I'll warn you, it gets to be I'll be right with you, Ben, it gets to be kind of boring reading because it's a whole description on how they made this big tent called the tabernacle. And the whole point of the tabernacle is for God to dwell or to live with the people. But it's very dangerous. So they have to build it in a specific way. And they actually tell the story twice, which we'll talk about why next week. But God's whole goal is to be with these people. But it's very tenuous until the cross. The cross ends up changing everything. Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
So, forgive my ignorance, but when it says, don't do this or you'll die.
Yeah.
Heaven a thing? Is it death, like cease to completely exist?
Right.
You understand
right.
what I'm saying? Or like, do they have souls? Or did these people not have souls?
Right. Is it death? Will they cease to exist? No, I think it means earthly death. I don't think it has, I think, yes, they do have souls. It's not like an eternal statement. I think it's mainly centered on the earthly existence. Yeah, I think most people would agree with that, but yeah, that's what I would say. All right, any other questions? Otherwise, let's go to Exodus 20. Exodus 20 is the Ten Commandments. So I feel like oftentimes we know the Ten Commandments, but we don't know Exodus 19. The problem is if we get it wrong, we think that, and I fall into this, I have my whole life, that God is a God of rules. Do you ever picture God as like a God with his rule book and he's just watching you and is like, made another mistake, missed another, and that's how I was like, I've always felt like every time I woke up, God's just waiting for me to make a mistake. And, oh yeah, Commandment 3. Oh yeah, Commandment 8. And I just kind of live in shame and kind of live like God's just kind of always ticked at me. And so, for me, my life changed when I had kids. I was like, oh, geez. If God looks at me like I look at Emily and Elise and Natalie and Luke, it's like, man, my picture of God is wonky. Something. And then I'm told in the Bible, yeah, God does look like he loves even more than I love Emily, Elise, Luke, and Natalie. So I've spent a lot of my life rewiring it. But part of the reason I got it wrong is because I got Exodus 20 in front of Exodus 19. Exodus 20 isn't like, hey, if you want to stay on my good side, make sure you have to do these things. Exodus 19 is comes first. So it's like, hey, Dave or Jeff or Isabel, I delight in you. I want to camp out with you. I want to live with you. Do you want to live with me? Yes? Okay. I'm going to show you how humans flourish. I'm going to show you, and it's not you have to do this or I'm ticked. God says, hey, do this and you'll flourish. Now there are expectations. God will often be like, you said you trusted me. Why are you living differently? But overall, it's very much like a healthy father-daughter, father-son relationship that when we fall short, God is so eager to say, it's okay, let's try again. Live this way and you'll flourish. And so that's really what these commandments are about. So let's look at Exodus 20. I think it's the Catholic Church. I think Peter Enns talked about this. I've heard this many times, but if there's any Catholics among us, maybe you can verify or But I think the Catholic Church is the one that says Exodus 20 verse 1 is the first commandment. We look at it as the prologue, but look at what Exodus 20 verse 1 says. It says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. It's not a commandment, but what is it? It's a statement. Yeah, it's a reminder of the gift, right? It's again like grace comes first. I think it's really brilliant. If it is the Catholic Church that does this, it's actually really brilliant. I would be a fan of it, that this is the first commandment, because it's reminding us that grace comes first. It's reminding us that we're not doing this to please some insecure God. It's that God saved me. God wants to be with me. He's going to lay out how our lives will flourish. And so that's how it starts. And then it gets into the Ten Commandments that we know. And so for covenant partners, they follow this. Now let's just talk about, I teased in the email and online, should the Ten Commandments be in our in our schools? That's a debate that's been happening. What did I do with my eraser? Anybody see my eraser? Nope, I'm on my own. Okay, it's right here. I found it. We talked about this in the Sunday school a little while ago. There's a big debate, like the Ten Commandments should be in our schools and they should be in our courthouses. And I'm going to be on the side, and you feel free to disagree with me. We just have to argue the Bible. I'm going to be on the side that they shouldn't be. That they shouldn't be in our classrooms and they shouldn't be in our courthouses. Because what's our greatest? What's our goal? What are our lives supposed to be about as Christ followers? Yeah, going to Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. We're supposed to represent God. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to represent God so that others might know that there's a God of order. We're supposed to be like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And if we represent God to our children or to our culture, that hey, if you want to be on God's good side, you got to follow these rules. We're really representing a pagan God. Again, a God that's like a checklist God. Oh, you did commandment 2, commandment 3. That's not who God is. God isn't one that says you have to do things to please me and then you will be saved. God is a God of love. And so if I was going to put something in the public schools or the Ten Commandments, I was thinking about it, like what would you put? If you're going to represent God well and you got to put something in a public place as a Christian, what would be the message that would be better than representing God as a God of have-tos if God is actually a God of want-tos? God isn't a God of you must, but God is a God of if you trust me. I think I would go to like 1 John 4:8. He sums it up, which I just said. God is love. You know, the famous verse, John 3:16, wouldn't be a bad choice, but I would also include 17. I think it's really important to include John chapter 3, verse 17. I'll just read both of those to you. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." We know that verse, but look at the second verse. "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through Jesus." So if you're a rule-following God, then you're going to condemn. Oh, you fall short, you fall short, you fall short. That's not God's heartbeat. He came not to condemn it, but to save it, to say, I am for you so much, I'm going to come here and die for you. The same question of Exodus 19. If you trust me, will you be? And so we talked about last Sunday that what did Jesus do? He brings a new covenant. He brings a new covenant. Here's one thing we get wrong, especially in our country. God made a covenant with Israel. but he doesn't make covenants with any other nation. God's goal isn't that you go out and make nations that are in covenant with God. That's never in the Bible. That was the plan for Israel, so that all people might know who he is. He never said, go make nations that are in covenants with God. He says now, go make disciples. Go, men and women now, individually, can enter in. And so now the covenant is for Israel. It's for Israel. And a lot of people say it this way, it's through Israel to the world. So it's not that Israel is not important anymore, it still is. And God still wants men and women of Israel to be in covenant partnership with him. But now he also wants Gentiles, he wants everybody to be in covenant with him. And this is the mission of God. We talked about on Sunday that even like nations can't offer, nations like people get mixed up with the United States to say, well, it was founded on Christian principles, which you can argue that it was, but nations don't get to like be founded on Christian principles and then say, okay, God, will you be with us just like you were with Israel? We don't get to propose to God. God is God and we're humans. He proposes to us and he leaves no room for that. That's not in his interest to make Christian countries. He's interested in the church, spreading the news that a new covenant has been offered to all men and to all women of every nation, of every stripe. And so I think it's very important to understand that and to know what the mission of God really is and what it really isn't. Any questions on that or thoughts?
You might get sidetracked, but so is Israel fulfilling that covenant today?
Well, again, you have the nation of Israel, but you have the people of Israel that are spread throughout the world. And so Israel's complicated because it's now again a nation, but it also is like you're German or Italian, you're a Jewish person. So the answer is yes and no. Like there's a lot of Jewish people that are followers of Jesus as the Messiah. Those parts of the nation of Israel are showing. There's a lot of, you could even argue there's Jewish people that are really serious about following Yahweh as they know in the Old Testament, and they're giving in a glimpse of who God is. But then there's a lot of Israel that's doing crazy stuff too, in and out of the country, and they wouldn't be. Yep. Yeah. If what?
If people don't know what that means.
Right.
Children are
Yeah.
you're using that money.
Yeah. Yeah. He talked about, and God entrusts us in our money. That was added in 1950 something. Should it be there? What does it mean to people? It's really kind of ironic because if Jesus has a problem with anything, it's money. And if in the United States we have a problem with anything, it's money. And so it's kind of in a lot of ways a hypocritical statement. Like, in God we trust. Well, all of us are struggling with not trusting the dollar. Like the dollar is what we trust. Because I know about you. Sorry, this is just a disaster today. I'm just watching me struggle. I've never in my life only had my daily bread in my fridge. I've always had probably a month's worth of bread in my fridge. I have a retirement account, I don't know. I think we put that on our money to make us feel good and to try to maybe think, oh, God will be happy with us if we put this on our money. Again, God's not manipulated easily. God's not looking to be like an insecure king, like, oh, you praise me, so I'm happy with you. God wants a real deep relationship with us. So You can probably tell. I don't think that was probably the best decision back in the day, but yep. Yeah. 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 So what does Jesus boil the rules down to? He boils it down to two. So he basically says your world will be ordered and free from chaos if you love God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. He says you can sum up the whole law and prophets in those two things. And so that's really, now in our world, like I'm not against laws, like we have to have laws and all of those things. But as a world, like if the world woke up every day and said, I want to love the God of the Bible with all of my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and I want to love my neighbor as herself, we wouldn't need police, we wouldn't need all this accountability. Like it would be a really beautiful place. Now, because it's a broken world, we got to have, lawyers and law, all the law. Does that kind of answer your question, or? Not in a broken world. I don't think so. But I think ideally, I think God would say, I'm just kind of thinking on my feet, but I think God would say yes. It kind of happens that way ideally in a marriage, right? Like Anita doesn't have like, if it all of a sudden Anita's like, to love me, you got to do these 20 things, like we're in a weird spot. But really the goal is like, I wake up every day thinking, how can I make Anita's life a little better today? And if she wakes up every day thinking, how do I make Dave's life a little better today? We don't have to have anything else. Now that doesn't happen a lot of days. So then we're like, hey, like this. But like if when I preach about marriage, like that's what the goal should be. Like all you should need to know is, Dave, wake up and try to make Anita's life a little better today, and trust that she's going to do the same thing for you. Yep. Yep. Right. Yeah, Jessica said, the commandments set knowing that we're not going to achieve them. Yeah, there's a great verse in Psalms that God knows you're human. God's not surprised that we fall short, that we're consumed with selfishness a lot. So, yes. Now, the interesting thing about it, if you look in Exodus 20, and when Jesus was alive, the Ten Commandments were a big deal. And the Pharisees interpreted the Ten Commandments at a pretty base level. Because as the Ten Commandments are written, you can achieve them. Like you can live by them. How many of the Ten Commandments are kind of subjective? There's a few that are. So if you look at like, you shall not steal, not very objective, like you either steal or you don't. You shall not commit adultery, pretty cut and dried. You shall not murder, very cut and dried. Honor your father and mother, much more subjective. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. That's pretty. The Jewish people made that really cut and dried. They had all kinds of rules about the Sabbath, so you knew if you were doing it or if you weren't. And you could research Judaism, but they made all of these 10. They laid it out so you knew exactly if you were breaking them or if you weren't. And then they made the bar pretty low, so it wasn't that hard. It was humanly possible to not break them. And so you could start to feel pretty good about yourself. Well, these are the 10, got them. What did Jesus do with that? He blew that all up, right? So if you read Matthew chapter 5, he starts to go through them. One, he blew up the Sabbath. It was ironic because Jesus actually did work on the Sabbath. He would do kind things and they'd get after him for being kind to people. And Jesus would be like, you don't understand God if you refuse to be kind because you're trying to obey a rule. And then he said, you shall not murder. And Jesus said, what about murder? It's about anger. Don't be angry. Well, dang it, now I'm going to break it every single day. He's like, you shall not commit adultery. It's not about adultery. It's about seeing people as objects and lusting. And so they're like, okay, you shall not steal. Well, I don't think Jesus talked about that one, but the Jewish people would talk about like if you withhold your stuff and you're not generous, you're stealing. And so he made these a very high bar because part of the point of it is to understand that I'm sinful and I'm broken and I'm selfish. And so Jesus kind of turned them on their heads a little bit. So because he wanted them to be what you were saying, Jessica, really. Let's go, we're going to run out of time here. Let's go to Exodus 20. I want to talk about this because it's kind of disconcerting. I'm going to read commandment verse 4. This happens a few times in the Bible, and it's a translation issue that I'm frustrated with. Chapter 4, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Now, people have an issue with that. I'll talk about that. I think that's pretty understandable. But the next verse is tougher. I am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. So when I read that, I've read that my whole life, it suddenly seems like very mean and very vindictive. Like, oh, I'm going to sin and you're going to punish Emily? Okay, that seems really off. So I want to point to a couple things. Like, what does this mean? If God is a God of love and he's not a pagan, insecure, easily angered God, what does this mean? One, I want you to see, before we get to the core of it, I want you to see a lot of grace and mercy here. One, the sin only lasts how long? To the third and fourth generation. And the love, and that's the word hesed, the hesed love lasts how long? Thousands of generations. So there's this dichotomy of the pain is only going to last a few generations, the love is going to last thousands. But then what I get frustrated with is this word punishing. I don't have my computer. Does anybody, well, you might have to trust me on this, but you can go home and look it up or put it into your phone. How many, does anybody have a Bible that does not say punishing in that verse? It's verse 5. Punishing the children. What's that? The entire family is affected. Yes, that's what I want to talk about. That's true. The Hebrew word there, you could pull it up if you went to stepbible.org and look at it. It doesn't mean, punishing is just a poor translation, and it's going to come up in a number of other important verses. What it's really saying there is it's going to visit. It's going to visit. So a better translation would be this: I am a jealous God, visiting the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to thousands of generations of those who love me. And what it's saying there is that when I sin, my sin doesn't just simply affect me. I wish that it would just simply affect me, but my sin affects other people around me. And so whatever my sin is, like if I'm not very generous and I'm really stingy and I don't, and then what's going to happen? Well, Emily spent her whole life from 0 to 5 especially watching my every movement. And Emily basically watched me from 0 to 18. Like, she knows everything about me. And she's learned how to see the world and to operate in the world by watching me, as did Elise and Luke and Natalie. So if I'm not very generous, most likely what's going to happen is that Emily, Elise, Natalie, and Luke are not going to be very generous either. They're going to hold on to their stuff because that's just how they were programmed. We all know that, right? We act like our parents in good ways and in ways that frustrate us. And we have to be very intentional not to act like our parents act. I was doing a marriage counseling once. This is my little soapbox. Well, it wasn't marriage counseling. It was like just life counseling. And I said once to a person, I said, well, so when you got married, because they were having some issues, I said, when you got married, what did you decide to do differently than your parents? And he was like, nothing. And I knew the family that he was living in, and there was a lot of chaos in his growing up. And I was like, oh, like, this is the problem. Like, whether your life is chaos or not, you should always think about, what do I want to replicate and what do I want to do differently? Because none of us are going to do anything differently than our parents did unless we really are intentional about it, really intentional. So it's a good practice for everybody. And so that's really what that verse is getting at. And I just wish it was written different so it was more intuitive to understand that. Any questions about that?
Well, it doesn't give you much hope. I mean, it says everybody sins.
Yeah.
I mean, so
The cutoff for like our kids?
no, the cutoff on, getting affected for 3 or 4 generations or having love for 1,000 generations. I mean, where's that line? Because everybody's sinning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what they're trying to do here is, like it says, of those who hate me, that if you're rejecting me, it's going to have wide-ranging consequences. If you're a Jewish person or here that is choosing to follow me and trust me, it's going to bless. Because the same thing is true. Like there's all parts of your parents' lives and your lives that line up with Jesus, and that's going to bless. Like the parts of my life that line up, bless Emily and Elise and Luke and Natalie, and will bless their kids and their kids. So there's a warning here, but also but I think to your question, Jeff, I mean, we have to kind of wrestle with the fact that I have to tell my kids, like, hey, like, I hope when you get married or as you get to be an adult, you look at Dave and be like, yeah, my dad was great, but this part about my dad, I'm going to try to live it a little bit differently. And yeah, I don't think we want our kids to worship us. We should be able to acknowledge our sin and encourage them, and celebrate them when you see them make some changes. Like, that's good. I've been working on that my whole life. I'm glad you've changed that. Does that somewhat answer your question, Jeff? Or
Yeah, I know. It's a tough one, I think.
yeah,
Addiction gets passed down.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And when you change your life, like as parents, like it's huge. Like I tell people all the time, like you can be worried about your kid. What you should really be worried about is yourself. Because your child might have watched you. They might be 22 and they watched you. And when they see you pursue God and they see your life changing, it can flip the script. It can change everything. Yep. Yeah.
We have about a 20-minute segment that we go through breaking the generational curse.
Right.
And it is really impactful for these folks in prison.
Yeah.
Because so many of them have a history.
Yep.
And how they grew up. And
Right.
It's
Right.
really impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, I've seen like if your parents are in their 70s and they change, like that's impactful. Like it can, it's not just when they're little kids. I mean, when they're 2 and 3 and 4, it's really important because they're just staring at you every single day. But you can't get too, you got to rest in the grace of God. I do a lot of geneograms with people who are going to get married, and it's crazy the stuff that shows up. Like it can be, it's just like it's tracing your genealogy, and there can be weird things like, oh, the women in this family always marry men that are at least 5 years older than them. Like there's weird things like that. Like how do you explain it? But it just keeps showing up. Yeah, but we're all sinful. We have to rest in the fact that I'm not representing God perfectly to Emily, and there's going to be some damage. I ask God to have grace on that. I know my kids are going to struggle. We want our kids not to struggle. Well, they are. We've got to trust God with that. But it's not this vengeful God that's getting joy out of punishing. All right. We're gonna pick this up. I'm gonna hand this out for you to take home. Here you go, Scott. You want to give these out? question we'll talk about a little bit next week is if the Bible reading starts to get a little bit tougher in Exodus and then Leviticus and Deuteronomy, there starts to be a lot of rules, and it can, and some of the rules are really disconcerting. And it can seem like there's two different gods. Like there's the God of the New Testament that's just way different than the God of the Old Testament. I don't think that's the answer. I think that there's something else we gotta wrestle with. So we're gonna save this for next week. But as you read Exodus 20 to 23, I want you to think about what laws do you see Jesus agreeing with, and what laws do you see Jesus having a hard time with? I'll just pull out one that I do. If you look at Exodus 21, verse 7, if a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as male servants do. If she does not please the master who was selected for her, for himself, he must let her be redeemed. Anyway, that law right there, why doesn't it say a man should never sell his daughter as a servant? If I was writing the law, that's what I would write, right? So, and that one's even, a lot of these laws that we'll read are pretty graceful and make sense, but then some really don't, and really are disconcerting to me, and be like, what is up with that? And so I think there's a few things to talk about, but I want you to know that it's okay to feel some type of way about some of these. Wait a second, what kind of God is this? We're going to keep pushing that these folks don't know God that well yet. God's mostly revealed in Jesus, but then why is this in the Bible? I want you to look at some of these laws, and we'll dig into this handout to begin next week, and we'll also talk about a little bit more where God starts to tell people to be violent, which is also disconcerting, and we'll talk about that a little bit next week. So we'll close in prayer, and then we'll open it up for questions. God, thank you that you are holy. We recognize that we're not. We thank you for your grace and mercy, and even as we talk about sins visiting those around us, we pray for your mercy in that. It visits our children, but it visits our friends, it visits our neighbors. So I pray that you would continue to transform us, that we might know that as we love our neighbor and love you, that also what visits our kids and what visits our neighbors often is love and mercy and grace that we show them. And so I thank you for these friends and how they demonstrate that to me and how they demonstrate that to their kids and to their neighbors. And we ask that we might represent you well, and you might show us how we represent you poorly, and we might have the courage to let you change that in us. I thank you for your word and the chance to discuss it and to wrestle with it. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, any other questions you have? And I'll take your immigration questions if you have them as well. Yes, Ben.
So I want to make it, something went through my mind when you asked that question about
The dollar, yeah.
this is what I've come to understand or believe or whatever, but so on the dollar, there's a lot of symbolism on that.
Pyramid in the eye.
Yeah, let's see, Novus Ordo Seclorum, which is the New World Order, and the controllers of this earth worship God, but it's the God of material, the God of this world, Lucifer. So I think that piece of paper is more like giving homage to Lucifer and stuff, not actually the God of the Bible. So it's kind of their sneaky little way of getting us all to kind of, be deceived into doing that stuff. I mean,
Yeah, and that's a theory. That's a possibility. I think overall, we think that we can make we can control God. Like there's so many armies in the world have fought with Bible verses on their uniform, thinking if I slap a Bible verse on my uniform, then God's happy, like I can manipulate him. You know, the classic one is World War II. The Nazis fought with God with us on their uniform. And so we just think, oh, if we do these little things, then God will be with us and then we'll be blessed. And I think God's just shaking his head. I'm like, no. I am not with you. And that was kind of Jesus' message to the Jewish people. You think that you obey these rules, but your hearts are far from me, and you're abusing the poor, and you're ignoring the widow. I'm not with you. Like, don't think I'm with you. So I think we just easily fall into that trap as well.
I thought I heard that these 10 Commandments were once or are 10 words.
Yeah.
So how do you get a whole 3 sentences out of one word?
Yeah.
What are the 10 words?
I would have to look that up. It's often called the Decalogue, and I think the Decalogue means is 10 words. It definitely is called the 10 words in like biblical scholarship, and I think maybe in Judaism. I'm kind of guessing here. I know it's called that for sure, and I think it's more of it's not boiling it down to one word. It's kind of these, probably maybe better said, like the 10 statements.
Because I can see 10 words being a lot easier to carve on tablets than all of this.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
chisel in one word.
Right. And, the confusing part, like, again, we want to make the Bible simple. It's just simply not. If you look at Deuteronomy 5, I think it is, or Deuteronomy 6, the 10 Commandments are stated again. But they're stated differently. No, not completely differently, but the words they're not lined up. So which version was on the tablets, or was it just 10 words on the tablets? Left to mystery.
Was it written in Hebrew?
Yes.
Each Hebrew letter represents multiple things, right? So like one word could have a bunch of...
It could, yeah. You're speaking of like numerology. There's they had numbers to their letters. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're kind of guessing. I have to look it up. I know in biblical scholarship it's often called the Decalogue, or I think it goes back to Judaism. I don't think they're meaning like it's just 10 words. I think it's like the 10 statements. But yeah, we could research it.
Podcast. First commandment says, you shall have no other gods before me. So the podcast was like, is God admitting that there's other gods before him with his first commandment?
Yeah. Like, is there other gods in the world? Or, yeah.
You should have no other gods before me. It's like, there are other gods.
Right. Which I think he is. Not necessarily like Zeus is real, but there's other things that you give your allegiance to.
Yeah, they would understand.
But the Hebrews would have understood there is Zeus. There is all these, yeah. Right, that's true. They would have thought the Egyptian gods were very real. And that's a part of even these laws. Like, God's writing to a specific people in a specific culture, so he can't just blow everything up. Like, he can't say necessarily, because I think you're right. What he's saying is like, well, now we understand that this is a monotheism, but his goal wasn't to correct all of that necessarily. Even with slavery, you wish he would just say no more slavery. But in that whole culture, there was no way to just get rid of it, which we'll talk about some next week. You're going to add something to that?
Oh, I just said they were human. The other gods were humanly created.
Yeah. Did God create chaos? I think what we have to say is that God created the option of chaos. That God, with all of suffering, God created a world where suffering was possible. I don't think he causes suffering, but he causes the possibility of us to use our free will to reject him. So God's still on the hook for it. but it's different than God like killing the 4-year-old. But he created, which I still begs the question: is it worth it? And I think it is. I mean, but sometimes it feels like it isn't. Yeah.
I know we talked about this the other week, but why again? I kind of look at like kind of like self-mutilation,
Yeah.
and why would God want that to happen? I know it was like a way of identifying stuff like that, but
Mhm.
like, why was that instructed by God to
Yeah.
do that? You know, like self-harm kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, it is self-harm. Yeah. I mean, it seems like it doesn't explicitly say, but the whole point, I think, is a recognition of that God is God and our dependence on God. So Abraham's story was that he did not have a child with Sarah until it was humanly impossible. And so the child was a miracle to remind people that God is a miracle working God, that God operates kind of outside of creation, that God is God. And so how are you going to best remember that story? God, I think, decided, well, you best remember that story by every time you see the male sex organ, it reminds you of the story because it's been mutilated or it's been cut. So it seems that's why. Like it's for a reason. It's to remember the story. Right. Right.
So that's one. And second question about
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Isabel, like you said, it's really not like the Jewish people and us. We always like want to make it about the rules and the things. It's never been about that, and Jesus always pushed about that. And as covenanters, one of our big ethos is freedom. So the circumcision was there as a reminder of the story to tell the world of the story, but it's always been about the heart. So you're going to see like Gentiles outside of this, even we've already seen it in the Exodus story, be heroes in the story and obviously know God. Like Jethro, Jethro probably was never circumcised. Is Jethro close to God? Yeah. Like it was again, like those were only supposed to be like not ultimate important things, but reminders of the story and to know the story. That's part of this class. Like we need to know the story, but the story isn't about following the rules so that God is happy. That's paganism. It's about a graceful God who's pursuing us.
World War II
Yeah.
and when Germany
The circumcision?
in the middle of the street,
You would know. Are you Jewish or not? Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
and stuff.
Huh. Interesting.
Just like
Yeah.
very,
Yeah. Yeah.
even those Germans who
Right. Yeah. I mean, the ironic thing is there's so much anti-Semitism that Christians are a part of, and they are part of like, well, the Jewish people crucified Jesus, so we're like but then like Jesus is Jewish, and Paul and Peter are Jew. Like it's all messed up. But one of the things for me, like there's a lot of things that convince me the Bible is true, but just that the Jewish people are still here is a miracle of miracles. Like for years and years they've been scattered. You know, they got a country back in 1948, and now a number of them live there, but they're still scattered. But yet they've they've managed to preserve their, their nationality, and which is quite miraculous. And then they've been persecuted, not only in Nazi Germany, but over and over. They've been,
Do you know why?
yeah.
They support each other.
Part of that persecution, I think, helps you stick together. Yeah.
They
But-
live together, that's why they
Yeah. Yeah, and I think so. But also I think they're God's people that God has preserved in very somewhat miraculous ways that I think still have an important part to play in the story. But I mean, most people groups like that would have just been assimilated by now into obscurity.
On that podcast, it was kind of interesting. He said he just commented on the last one. Do not cover your neighbor's house or something. He said,
Yep.
where's that line between admiring and coveting?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. And then 2 tablets and what was on each tablet, and then I think the theory that he embraced was each tablet was the 10 decalogues.
Yeah.
And one tablet was supposed to go in the tabernacle, and one tablet was supposed to be for the people.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be like a carbon copy paper agreement.
Right.
That's his theory.
Yeah, he was speculating. We kind of think of 5 on one tablet, 5 on the other, but it could have easily been 10 and 10.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I
yeah.
liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. One of the interesting things you can do with there's a couple things you can do with the 10 Commandments which are interesting. Is to put them under love God, love neighbor. And as Jesus summed this up, I mean, Jesus did a very interesting thing we'll talk about in a few weeks, but he took love God, which this is super important and we'll talk about it, but it's Deuteronomy 6. It's called the Shema. And in Deuteronomy 6, it's like the Lord's Prayer. The Jewish people would pray the Shema every day, like at least twice. And so they knew that really well. So when Jesus said love God, it was like, oh yeah, the Shema. That's what we've been doing our whole life. And then if you look at Exodus, or it's Leviticus 19:18, it's a really obscure verse. And it's not even the whole verse. Jesus just chooses part of it. I think it's 19:18. Yeah. The whole verse kind of works. It says, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So what Jesus does is he changes the Shema. He goes, yeah, the Shema is great, but you need the Shema plus this little part of Leviticus 19:18. Love your neighbor. And he says everything can be summed up with that. And and then if you can really, basically it's the first, most people would say, well, the first 4 Ten Commandments really focus on how you best honor and love God. And then the last 5 or 6 really on about how you love and honor your neighbor. Another really good practice with the 10 Commandments is to state them in the positive, because a lot of them are in the negative. And I really love that Jesus made it, you shall not, he shall, well, go do these things. Well, instead of you shall not steal, you shall go be generous to your neighbors and bless them with things. You shall not murder, but you shall be really kind, even to those who are mean to you. Like, go out each day and find ways to be kind, especially to the orneriest folks. You shall not commit adultery, but sex isn't bad. You shall enjoy it with your spouse and make use of it. You shall, the Sabbath is the positive one, which we still should do. You should find ways to rest. So it's good to take the positive ones or the negative ones and turn them positive. You shall not covet, but you shall be happy for your neighbor who has nice things. That's tough. Like, oh wow, it's really great you have that, and actually mean it. It's a good practice. So the 10 Commandments are still really good, but Jesus sums them up pretty beautifully.
Well, I know 2 years ago we talked about more on the do not murder.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between murder, killing, like homicide versus killing in war?
Right. Yes, people that argue for just war, they will make a distinction that murder and killing are different. And there's a lot of ink spilled. There's an argument to be made. I kind of lean more towards we're just trying to find excuses to be violent. But there is an argument to be made of like, and ultimately like if I take somebody's life to save somebody else's life, that's different than my anger is so roused at my neighbor that I just finally obliterate them. So I think, it's not simple. There's definitely, yeah, like again, Nazi Germany is kind of the classic case for just war of like, is that murder or is that, saving, people from this death that was coming? And you can get into self-defense as I just think we have to be careful because in the end we're always tempted to find ways to be okay being violent. Yep, Betsy.
So it says
Yeah.
love, and so when you read it, it talks about like other
Yeah.
then he talks about like wiping them.
Yes.
So
Great question.
I mean,
Yeah.
my brain sometimes.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good Bible reading, Betsy. Did you hear what she said? She's like, love thy neighbor, but then in a few verses later it says you're going to go kill them. Yeah. I think we're going to talk about that, but I think that's what partly of like even as we read it through Jesus talks about not taking revenge and not killing. So then what's up with what we're going to read in Exodus 23 where it says go kill them?
Did I get ahead?
A little bit. We haven't quite got into in the next few chapters, Israel's going to start to be violent, and there's going to be verses that seem like God's telling them to be violent, but then the ethos of our faith is to love our neighbor and hate and to love our enemies and to not take revenge. So is God different? Has God changed? This is a really complicated question that I have my theories that we're going to talk about, but I think we should wrestle with it. Because a lot of people outside the faith are like, well, do you read your Bible? Yeah, your God says two different things. And at some level we have to say, yeah, like there's some complicated stuff we have to try to figure out. Yes.
Kind of speaking towards like the immigration thing.
Yeah.
I hope to come this Sunday and stuff, so
Yeah.
about that. But I guess I've kind of heard that there's really only two religions out there. There's fallen angel religions, and fallen angel religions are essentially, driven by, Lucifer that wants to, lie, steal, and destroy. And, if there's, immigrants that are coming in, not all, right? I mean, not trying to paint everyone with brush, but if their intent, based on their, spiritual upbringing, is to like lie, cheat, steal, and destroy, kind of a deal, how is that, as a Christian,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's hard to say, because I understand you're saying, like, well, if you have more than one day's bread, then technically you can be viewed as, like, stealing because you're, whatever.
You're hoarding. Yeah. Yeah.
There's people that are going to want and want and want. They're not going to have the same, they're not going to,
Yeah.
they're going to want the dailies, your dailies.
So, yeah.
More,
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a partly what we're going to talk about Sunday is like the laws of the land we can only affect so much. A lot of what we can affect is how do I live today with the neighbors that are around me and that are here. We need to understand like the immigration laws of our country, not that we can change them. I mean, we can write our Congress and we should, but we should at least understand the dilemma. And to your point, I know our country's been limiting refugees, which are different than immigrants, but at least 50% of the 45% over. I have the stats, but I think what I read is 45%. I don't know which years, but recently are Christian. Like so many people that need a new home are Christians who are being killed because they're Christian and they need a place to come. And a majority of people coming from Central America, South America are Christian. So it's not as simple as like all immigrants are atheists or following. Buddhism or Hinduism or Islam. So yeah, there's some that aren't Christian, and what's their intent? Yeah, I mean, but that's kind of the laws of our nation. I mean, then the question is, well, today, how do we react to everything as Christians? That's a kind of a different question.
If I understood you correctly, but refugees are immigrants, and not all immigrants are refugees.
Refugees are immigrants, but not all immigrants are refugees. Immigrants? Yeah, I think so. Refugees, like I used to live in Wilmer. It has a large Somali population, and I got to know a lot of them. Well, the Somalis were coming to Wilmer. They weren't taking boats and like getting here on their own. They were being flown. And refugees, well, you can look at the stats, but they will spend. Somalia in the 90s had like no government. It was straight crazy. It was chaos, and so they're Islam, but they would be in like these refugee camps for a long time. And no refugee gets into the United States without a lot of vetting. Like there's a lot of vetting process that you have to go through, and it's a long process before they came. And so they're very much known. They're very much vetted. And obviously vetting can go sideways or it doesn't always work, but there's a long process to have folks come. Now, a lot of immigrants can come a few different ways, but the challenge is, which we'll talk about as you read it, there's really not, like people will say, like, I'm all for borders, I'm all for a process and that we should have a process. One of the great challenges in our country, as you read it, is like there's just really not really much of a way to come legally. Like you can say there is a process. It's really expensive. It's really long. If you're in a country and you're getting $3 a day and you have children and you have parents that are aging and you're trying to figure out what to do, like that's a lot. There's a lot of stories like that of like, I got to do something and I would love to go legally, but it's not an option. The stories are just very varied and very, very complicated. So we'll lay out kind of the path to legal immigration. It's not that they're not there. It's just that they're kind of there in name only. Very complex, very expensive, very slow. Like you're talking 15 to 20 years. Yeah.
Do you have any like clip note links you could send out prior to Sunday?
Yeah.
To be prepared here to read this article, but
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I have a book too.
yeah.
Yeah, Kenzie.
Maybe you'll address that on Sunday, but there used to be the Dreamers Act.
Yeah, DACA.
Yeah, if anyone was born in the U.S., you were a citizen,
Yeah.
and then they got rid of that.
Yeah.
What happens to become legal, or was that?
Yeah, it's so complicated. Some of it I need to write down. I don't have it memorized. But yeah, and even now, like some people that are have temporary status, it's just being taken out from under them at times. And like deportation needs to happen. Like there needs to be laws and there needs to be a border. Like I think we'll talk about it on Sunday, but I think we should agree, like under President Biden, the border was straight chaos. Like there's a lot of people that are Christian to be like, yeah, it was way too chaotic. I was a podcast where like Biden's people were just after him to do something and he just wouldn't, and I don't know why, and it got way too crazy. I think the response that we're seeing now, like we have the covenant, like we have people that I know, like that come to church that are in hiding, like they just won't trust that. Yeah, I'm legal, but what's going to happen with these federal agents? Like I'm not leaving my house if I can. And I think the response is also poor. President Obama actually deported the most people. President Trump might pass it in his second term, but Obama deported more people than Trump did in his first term. And some of that's good. Some of it might not be. Like my daughter Elisa's best friend when she was growing up was illegal. And our teachers knew, and the teachers told us, well, David and Anita, like, if ICE could come to the trailer park, and when Elise is there playing, and like they could just disappear. And we're like, okay, good to know. But Elise would go play, and then we moved to Chicago, and Elise's best friend, Diana, her parents were on a trip, and they came to visit us in our apartment in Chicago. And when they came, their faces were kind of all aghast, and I forget his name. He was from Guatemala. He's back in Guatemala now, I believe. But his face was aghast because he had driven in Chicago, like Minneapolis, a lot of one-ways, and he was going down the one-way the wrong way. And he knew that if you break any law, that kind of triggers things. And so he was like, whoa, like a ticket in Chicago could have got him straight back to Guatemala. And so that was under Obama's term. Like a lot of people were being deported. But usually it was if you broke a law. It wasn't that they were just showing up, raiding businesses and stuff. Now, if they knew like a meatpacking plant, like I think Obama did that. Like if there was word out a meat, something is like really abusing the rules, they might show up. But it wasn't anything like here. But he deported more people than any president in modern history, I think.
And a lot of them at the border.
Yeah, and a lot at the border, right. Right. So, yeah. So it's a very complicated issue.